Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to the Occult Explorers. I'm Snappy, and I'm joined as always by my good friend and co-host, Dion. How's it going, Dion?
Life is great. Glad to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful. So today's going to be a fun episode. A little bit of an upset. Our good friend Daphne, who was set to be our special guest for today's episode, had some personal issues and had to decided to not join us. So instead of talking about snake venoms, which was what we were originally set out, Dion has prepared a special presentation for us on entheogenic husbandry, but focused upon the goats. And then after that presentation is done, we're going to be joined by our good friend Ammon from Lady Babylon 666, who's going to help us break down a lot of this stuff, especially as it relates to Jesus. So this one, again, we want to make sure that we're giving our special warnings. So first off, we're not experts, we're explorers. We're here to tell you stories, to share mythology and to share ideas. We're not passing judgment. We're just telling you the things as we understand them. And second, this is going to get pretty spicy, as always. Expect sex, expect violence. We're talking dirty goat people, right? Satyrs and sacrifice and drugs and blood, right?
That is true. Trigger warnings. You said animals and sex. Well, sex with animals as well.
Right.
It's called zoophilia. So it's not too late. The ride is getting started. Put your seatbelts on. And if it's too much, go take a walk. Go do something else. But let's get started. First pick.
All right. Let's bring this up here. Oops. Stupid mouse wants to give me a hard time. Okay, come on. There we go. Sorry.
And the topic today was goat. Who's the goat? G is for goat. The first myth I was reminded of was Zeus.
Right.
And Kronos, kills his kids. So Zeus, if you know the story, Kronos makes some babies and kills them. Except one gets hidden in a cave, supposedly in a cave, where he's nursed. Zeus is nursed by a goat nurse. Amalthea, if I'm saying the name correctly.
Yeah, Almathea. And yeah, she raises Zeus and raises her on her milk, which gives him special strength and to overcome and overthrow Kronos, right? She's wrested away and protected by Rhea, who hides her, right? Or hides Zeus. And then Almathea raises Zeus, giving him this special milk. And then when Zeus eventually defeats Kronos, Almathea is put into the stars and is said to become Capricorn in some of the myths. Though there are also other stories related to the sea goat and whatnot. But yeah.
Yeah. And even you even said sea goat, because that will come up today, because when we study these animals, it ends up that they're out in the ocean as well. In some of the mythologies, it turns up. And part of the title, Entheogenic Husbandry being a relationship with plants and animals and their breeding and taking care of them. But with entheogenic, mind you that there's something that's called biotransformation, where you could feed animals different types of, we do it for nutrition. When they feed cows grass or when we get milk. But there were psychoactive milks back in the day. And this process of biotransformation is when you feed a psychoactive substance to an animal, and either their urine, their blood, or their milk will contain a bioavailable psychoactive. It'll break it down through their digestive tract. Is that what's going on right there?
It's hard to say. One thing I have noticed when studying a lot of this stuff is that milk, specifically goat milk, is something that it's so well documented and talked about. And we know that any of these milks would have been, like you were saying, a prime source for infusing with the entheogens. So they could be doing two different things. They could be feeding the goat substances and then taking the milk, or they could be taking the milk and using it as a base to make things like Indian bong, which is like an infusion with cannabis, sometimes with poppies, sometimes with other things, you know? So there's a lot going on with that.
You know, and it's wild that you said bong because the goat is one of the animals sacrificed to Kali.
That's true.
You know, I don't know if they make bong lossies out of goat milk, but I know if you feed a goat poison oak and take the goat milk, it helps you build an immunity.
Right. And I always think of, too, there's all of these myths and stories. We see this in the cult of Dionysus, where there's these stories of the goats eating various plants and getting stoned, and then that being what leads people to finding these plants. And we even have a modern reiteration of this myth that's very popular in regards to coffee. You know, I'm sure many people are familiar with that story of the happy goats, where people saw the goats eating the coffee beans and then getting excited, and that's how they knew to ingest them. So the relationship, goats are notorious for destroying and eating just about anything, you know? So if there's a plant, they're going to get into it. So people would have recognized this and watched the animals, as well as tested things on these animals, you know?
Well, imagine, though, with certain plants, they covet them and protect them. And that's how they know they were special, because when you'd walk up and the other goats are like, stay away, we want these plants.
Right.
Then you know, ooh, what's that one? Does it get them high? So yeah, let's hit the next picture. Boom. You know, Pan.
Pan.
We've been hearing about Pan recently, just in the past week, you know, coming up. So I thought I'd throw that in there. And here's Pan with Daphne's. You know, you might know a little bit about the poetry. Maybe you could.
Yeah. So Daphne is a really interesting figure, because on one hand, there's these stories of them being the lover of Pan, and a lot of this has to do with like this. It's a symbolic kind of thing, because Daphne is credited with inventing bucolic poetry, which is all of this nature poetry and this love of the wilderness. And there's all these kind of interesting stories about Daphne. The one I'm most familiar with is he falls in love with the nymph, but the nymph and him get together, but she makes him promise, if you're going to be with me, you can't look at anyone else. And that goes for a while, but eventually he does, and then he gets destroyed by this.
Well, here Pan is teaching him how to play the panpipes.
Right.
And he's credited as being his Eromenos. You know, his erotic inspiration is love.
You know, and this is a relationship that we would see reflected a lot, you know, because Pan is representative of the satyrs, you know, and in this you see Daphne is kind of representative of a younger person. And that would have been what we would have seen. We'd see these satyr figures who are usually these, you know, it's kind of interesting is that what we see is a conflagration, because there are two types of figures associated with Pan. There's the satyrs, right? And then there are the panes, or the fawns. Mm-hmm. And it's actually the fawns that are the ones to say that have the goat feet. But the satyrs are kind of like, they're the ones who ingest the drugs and get the giant erections, you know? And it's only later in the Roman period that they take on more of this like Fonic imagery, you know?
I'm glad you brought that up.
This really reminds me of those kind of relationships we hear with these various satyrs. They're always teaching the heroes and the youth. You know, it's always this kind of a pederast relationship.
So, you know, in a previous episode, the theater episode, theater as therapy, as a sacred healing event, we talked about an event, the City Dionysica, is where it was an event where they would take over, and they held these Bacchic Dionysic theater rites competition for 6 days. You know, remember we talked about that? And
yes,
and they were a form of the sanitized Dionysian rituals. You know, the whole city took part in them, and they had a form of 3 different plays, tragedies, and then they had the comedies, and then they had the satire relief in between.
That's
where
true.
They would have these erotic, horny kind of things going on, where they dress up people in the audience with giant leather dildos, and you know, they do these plays. But let's hit the next pic, and we'll talk more about the City Dionysia. Nope.
Oh wow!
Did that happen? Just I warned you guys. about these fawns and Pan and the Tragos, the goat, this whole relationship with the gods. And it's called zoophilia, but back then it was considered normal in some cultures. Just saying. Otherwise, they would have gone to great lengths to make these statues and mythologies surrounding these goats. So this is the next pick. Boom. We showed this is actually from modern times, 1800s, Oddfellows. Like we were talking about Wyatt Earp in one of the episodes. And at his initiation, he had to ride one of the goats. There's different mythologies about riding the goat in Freemason. The Masonic lodges. But this was also taking place then because they had this back then. They'd have satyrs riding goats through the town, through the festival. So let's hit the next pick. So
it's important we remember that in the satyr plays, the chorus would always be people who dressed up like satyrs and, would be invoking this goat imagery and riding the goats and harassing people,
Oh, yeah. Part of the word tragedy comes from tragos, meaning some type of goat song.
Wow.
That's where hopefully our Greek friends will correct us if I'm wrong, but tragos, goat song, tragedies, songs about goats. Here's a drinking vessel. Rams and goats are also connected. Sheep, rams, and goats in some of the mythologies. But in the 6-day competition, people would come from the outlying states and they would get drunk. They'd be encouraged to do a lot of wild stuff. They'd watch these plays. They would have a parade. Let's hit the next pic. And maybe I got a picture of the phalloi. They would carry giant phalluses through the street. And these are satyrs right here. This is this imagery, this Bacchic imagery that would take place through theater and sacrifice. And the sacrifice was never in public. It would take place out of the sight of the public. And in the plays, even in the plays, were sanitized. If there was a sacrifice, a messenger would come and tell you, he is dead. Or you hear the scream from off stage. They didn't show the blood, but the sexuality was encouraged during those 6 days of this competition, to see who was the goat, who was the main comic or the main playwright that would get picked in this festival. And they would also do these goat sacrifices. If you want to hit the next pick. Boom. That's part of it, was the sacrifices of goats. And I had asked AI at that point about, were they using goat fluids in the Dionysian rituals? And they said, yeah, goat milk. Goat milk mixed with wine was common, as well as psychoactive goat urine.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because they're good with grains. You see them eat anything. Like we've used goats to clear fields. It's much cheaper than you going out there with the pickaxe. You just tie your goats there every day, move them along, and boom, 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 to clear your field.
This is an important
track.
Yeah, this is an important thing, though, in agriculture that a lot of people would recognize, because goats will tear up the grass from the roots, right? They'll eat everything. Whereas, cows and sheep are grazers.
Right. Did I say graze? Yeah, that's wrong. Sorry, correct me. That's the wrong word. They'll eat everything. They can eat plastic, whatever. It doesn't mean it's good for them, but they're going to try to eat it.
Yep.
I've seen them eat through everything. Goats are special. In these sacrifices that they did to them. We talked about Aphrodite in previous episodes. And there's different forms of Aphrodite. One that was connected to like Asclepius with the snakes. One, Aphrodite with shells, like the sea foam coming from water. Let's hit the next imagery. We got Aphrodite. How do I pronounce this correctly? Epitragia. The goat, Aphrodite of the goat.
Amazing.
Where she rides the goat. If you hit the next pick, I think even got another one had to confirm and make sure. Here's another one, where she's riding a goat. Wow. And this is before she became Aphrodite Pandemos, Aphrodite for all the people. Because you were talking about sea goats, and that's what came up. was, well, how is all these oceanic deities connected to goats? Just like in the last episode, we saw how oceanic deities are connected to horses.
Right.
The hippopotamus.
So interesting. Yeah, we're gonna have to ask Ammon about this because it's pretty wild stuff.
And Aphrodite's chariot is also pulled by goats. Oh, well, you get it the next pick because that's somebody else's chariot who's pulled by goats. That's Thor.
Right. The primary god of the oldest versions of the Norse mythology. It's not Odin who's the main one. It's usually Thor, right?
With his hammer.
Yep.
And with Thor, his chariot is pulled by goats in some of the mythologies.
Interesting.
And the name of the goats are called teeth grinders.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, in the Old Nordic language, they're called teeth grinders because they would make some kind of sound with their teeth and just gnaw down. And there's lots of wild mythologies with the goats. How he fed them, he ate them. Originally, he ate them, and it gave him such a good feeling. He resurrected them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he originally eats them, and he gives him such a feeling. He resurrects them with his hammer, and they become his pulling his chariot.
That's amazing. When I think of the Norse mythology, I always think of, I can't remember the name of the goat, but there's a she goat in Valhalla that produces the mead. So it's not like a traditional mead that they're drinking; it's the milk of the she goat.
Well, hit the next pick. There it is.
Oh, wow.
The tree is Ladera, a mythological tree. Hadron. And she would eat the tree and produce this, is it urine or milk, into the mead that's being fermented. Remember, mead is being fermented. We talked about bees because it uses honey and mead. And they were using different forms of psychoactive honeys.
Wow.
Like one was in Scotland, we're talking about heather.
Right.
Bees eat heather, and then
about that too.
The honey psychoactives. So there was lots of psychoactive things. And just so you know, there's also mythologies concerning Loki. Because if you're going to get into goats and psychoactives, with both of these mythologies, Loki's involved. Because we know Loki's the trickster.
Right.
That shaman. And so, the milk of Hydra. We were talking about, that's what I was saying at the beginning of the episode. It was that milk of Almathea.
Right.
And here's that same kind of milk again, except fermented. In our last episode, we talked about how they were fermenting horse milk, the kumis, Genghis Khan, as well as donkey milks, to make this alcoholic beverage, but also that pregnant mare urine, which is used as an estrogen today for millions of people around the world in formless, and how they were collecting it in the form of cheese curds, like clay pots, like yogurt, like bong, and they would ferment it and then add on a daily basis, because that's how these pots are made, these curds. So that's why some people don't understand the biotransformation process. It's not just the animal. You could take that part and transform it through fermentation processes. And that's where you got yeast and sugars help break down those fats that were biotransformed from the plants through the animal into other things. And we also talked about in the last episode, canary grass, which is used Phalaris aquatica, which horses eat it and get the stagers. And AI said that the urine produces DMT, which you could then ferment with that into that cheese substance, like the meat we're talking about here.
Wow.
So there's more to these. This is alchemical processes right here to do lots of different things, depending on what the plants are, and depending on what type of goats, because that's husbandry, and depending on your brewing capabilities. So it's a multidisciplinary process to, And part of the sacrifice at that Dionysia festival, the goat's name was Pharmakeus.
Yeah, the Pharmakos. Yeah.
Yeah, there you. Yeah, correct me, please. And that is something that you would ingest or imbibe, to get high.
Yeah, yeah, it's related to that same word. There's a lot going on there because in this Pharmakos ritual too, this was also when they would do the in the Greek they would actually take two people. One person would be one person would be sacrificed, or one goat sometimes would be sacrificed, and then the other one, the twin, is like loose into the wild and banished. And there's this whole thing about that.
The hero twins, huh? Well, we're talking about that today. We're going to get into that a little later. And then when Almond joins us, he'll unpack that even further.
Mm-hmm.
So goats around the world are used from India in Kali sacrifices, in Nordic shamanism, Greek mythologies, also in the Quran and with Muhammad, in the different hadiths and the different scholars that interpret that stuff. If you could hit the next pick. Yeah, that's a goat right there from Eid al-Adha. Once a year, they do sacrifices. They sacrifice goats.
Interesting.
And they paint them and everything. But the thing that's interesting was both you and I have read an article that dealt with the milk of Hydron. And the author used different similarities dealing with Muhammad and goats and milk, and posited and talked about that. And we did an episode before talking about Muhammad in several episodes about his relationship to camel urine, camel milk being mixed, people drinking Muhammad's urine as well. But, there's a couple different things we can talk about with the goats in Islam. Because there's one that's famous. First is with Abu Bakr. You've heard of Abu Bakr.
Yes, of course. He was the second caliph, right?
People say, he's very famous. He wanted milk, goat milk. And they were at a village, and there was an old goat that couldn't produce. And Muhammad's, I'm going to get you that magic milk you need. And Muhammad goes over there and caresses the goat. And he's there for some time with the udders, and he produces that magic milk for Abu Bakr. Now, but it's very famous. If you type in goat in Quran, what'll come up is chapter 33 in Aisha. We've talked about Aisha Kadisha in other episodes. Be careful. But with Aisha, she gets part of the Quran eaten from a goat. A goat steals the pages of the Quran from under Aisha's bed that she's hiding. That Muhammad had written some certain pages for the Quran, and Aisha hid them. And what was it concerning? Adult breastfeeding.
Adult breastfeeding?
Yeah. I ain't making this up. Type it in, adult breastfeeding, Aisha and the goat. And you'll learn about the missing pages in the Quran that the goat ate.
That's so wild.
It deals with, like I said, adult breastfeeding, because that was a thing. Just saying.
I mean, I'm not surprised.
And so this goat with these sacrifices. You've heard of the term Baphomet.
Of course.
Mahomet. Baphomet. A lot of people posit originally that goat, a Baphomet, was Muhammad.
Yeah, that is something that a lot of scholars believe. They said it was a corruption of his name, and it was used to vilify Islam and such. I have heard that.
Yeah, it's an older, because I was looking up art. Well, let's hit the next pick. Elfus Levi. We're going to have to throw up the Baphomet if we're going to be talking about goats, obviously.
Yeah.
And this pick, what's 1800s, 1850 something, I think, and a lot of people posit that this is in Satanism and goats and the Baphomet and all this, and where they're tracing it back, they're trying to find where's the oldest representation of this, and it was in those caliphs' manuscripts, like I think the 1100s or something.
That's so interesting because we do know that the Templars, right? They go to the Middle East and they're interacting with the Muslim scholars and they're smuggling in a lot of this magical and underground literature that had been obscured by the Roman Church. And they're bringing that with them back into Paris, you know, and we know that they're accused of worshiping the Baphomet. And when we're talking about Elfus Levi, right, that's his drawing. He's also one of these figures who believes that the Baphomet, it wasn't actually related to Muhammad, the name, but it's rather a cipher. And he gives its solution as potentially Sophia, the goddess of wisdom. And it's kind of wild that this comes up here because the show I did yesterday with Graham when we were doing Searching for Dragons, HD, the poet scholar we were talking about, she really related the Baphomet and connected the Baphomet to the cosmogonic Eros or the Orphic Fanes, that original bigendered being at the beginning of creation. But she saw this as the alchemicalized version, where this was what Lucifer was showing you how to become, how to heal those wounds of separation, you know, at least in her own personal mythology. Really interesting stuff.
Yeah, it gets pretty deep,
right?
You know, and so different people will interpret this in different ways, whether it's Masonic, Islamic, Satanists, modern day Satanists. You know, they have a whole other take on this, which we don't represent. You know, a lot of people think that, you know, upon watching our programs, they hear words and they can think whatever, and they attach meanings to us. You know, you need to go to the dictionary and look up these words. You know, worry about your own lives. Attach meaning to your own life. So let's hit the next pick. Boom. Book of Hours. That's what I was also reminded of. Book. You know what the Book of Hours are?
Not 100%. What does this refer to?
They're medieval prayer manuscripts. And in a lot of the images, they have goats. People riding on goats. You know I'm going to put a goat in crucifixion in here.
Of course.
And so I just had to throw that in there. That's because it's in their art. These are symbols that are part of European subconscious, Middle Eastern subconscious, in their art and symbols and iconography.
Well, you know, it's important. Yeah, it's important that we talk and we break down this because, you know, a lot of scholars and a lot of people believe that, and Christians are interpreting this themselves, you know, at least by the second generation of Christians, where they are looking at the Yom Kippur goat sacrifice, where you have the two goats, you know, one that is killed and then one that is cast out, or one that is burnt as a sacrifice and then one is cast out. And they're supposed to be twins, similar to what we see with the Greek pharmakos ritual. And they're identifying Jesus and Barabbas as analogous to the goats of Leviticus, or, you know, and later scholars are saying that they're analogous to the goats of the pharmakos. So,
yeah, well, we'll get into more of that today. Hit the next pick. Right there. This is a stained glass representation of what you're talking about.
Oh,
but
wow.
Part of the process included Aaron casting lots.
Interesting.
Got to cast those lots. It's that little process, the gaming process. We'll take it back to Chaco Canyon. This is the Mayan ball court. Games are part of the process because there was two goats, just like there was two donkeys for the Messiah to ride in. You know, people think it's one donkey. Say they came back with two donkeys. How do we choose who's Azazel with the last, you know, L at the end there? Because we talk about L in our episodes. To cast out. And so, of course, you would cast lots. You know, and they do that at the crucifixion too. Casting lots. And they want to choose which goat gets to go free and wander. You know, that's what happens. The goat that's chosen for the sins, Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, he gets cast out and can wander the desert. And there's different mythologies of what happens to the goat after it's wandering, you know, in the desert, as well as the killing of other goats, like thousands of goats off a cliff, throwing. got a lot of sin, got to get rid of. And that's where you get the term scapegoat.
Right.
You know, to scapegoat someone is when they take on your sins. And that's what the goat was for. It was taking on the sins of the community.
Yeah, of course.
And then, you know, and it would be set out to wander. You know, there's lots of symbolism there to unpack. And the casting of the lots there, that stuff deals with astral theology. Because that's a certain time of year that takes place. Because this is also connected to Rosh Hashanah. And the eclipse that just popped off a little while back, and the time of year when certain things take place. Different calendars, 2 calendars. Civil religious calendar. But yeah, it's a very interesting story that the hero twins and the sacrifice and the goats, and that's Azazel, you know. And you would wonder, does it go farther back? And sure, let's hit the next pick.
And I just talking about Jesus too, I want to insinuate, right? Like there's Jesus, right, who is the son of the Father, and then there's Barabbas, which means son of the Father, and he also has that name of Jesus, right? So like there's this clear twin imagery going on, and it's like, and for those of us who study the Ammon work, right, Barabbas is a pirate.
Yeah.
And what is Jesus? Also.
Pan's Grotto. That's in Israel. I know one of our friends, Gnostic, did an episode about it, because he's actually went there and took pictures and stuff. You know, and for some people, they consider this as the door to hell, or this is the entryway to hell, Pan's Grotto. A lot of sacrifices being taken place here to the goat god. You know, satirical rituals taking place here. Satirical. Now, is that a play or is that a goat ritual?
Why not both?
yeah, you know, Pan's Grotto. Because we know that Asterion was a Dionysian stronghold as well as Aphrodite of Goat, and then you have Pan's Grotto here. Let's keep going. Boom. Jupiter Ammon. Now, like I said, when we're talking about goats, we talk about goats and rams together in parts of mythology, because sometimes they conflate them. Sometimes they move it around. Jupiter Ammon is a form of Ammon, Ammon Ra, like Egypt, and it's merged with Greek. It's about this time frame when people are worshiping Zeus Ammon. You've heard of Zeus Ammon?
Yeah.
Jupiter Ammon, different Baal Ammon.
Yeah, Baal Haman is a very, very common deity, right? For the Carthaginians.
And they sometimes, unfortunately, would do sacrifices. You know, a special form of sacrifice. Goat sacrifices. And you know what you call a young goat? A kid.
What? True. Oh my gosh, I forgot about that.
Right. Zeus Ammon was a very popular god at a certain point. This is a hybrid of Greek, Egyptian, Middle Eastern, you know, when it's all coming together.
Yeah. Like we see with like Artemis at Ephesus, right? Where you see all these various elements of all these different mythologies.
You know, so it goes farther back though, because when they're putting the word Ammon in there, we've shown the Oracle of Ammon at Siwa.
Yeah.
Where they had, you know, temples there in Egypt to have a god Ammon. You know, let's hit the next pick and we'll explore some of the different stuff. So we have Ammon Ra or Amun, Ammon, ram's head or goat's head with horns. You know, Ammon is an aspect of Egypt mythology that's very controversial. Because if you know about Akhenaten, who was into the Aten, which is the sun, the solar sun, changed a lot of Egyptian mythologies and changed their names even to Aten from Ammon. And when the priests came into power later, they killed them off and tried to erase that from history and take it back to the Ammon priesthood, the Ammonite priesthood, which is very famous in Egypt. You know, and part of the symbology was the horns.
Yeah.
You know, and you see that symbol above the horns there, that little shape.
Yeah, what is that? Interesting. It's like a sun.
Yep. And so, you know, there's another entity that named Noom. Let's go to the next picture. I think I threw in a picture of him. Yeah, Noom. And that would be a goat god or a ram god, depending on older versions. And he's actually the one who built the solar boat. Remember we showed the solar boat?
I do. Yeah, that's where all the gods kind of ride. Yeah.
Yeah. And you have Horus, which is the Christ on there, and Set, which is his uncle, that he gave him the semen lettuce to subdue him,
Right.
is at the front of the boat killing the snakes. That's his job. Well, Noom built the boat for them.
Interesting.
And the goat god is the god of the waters. How is that? These mythologies are just, you know, there's a lot to unpack here in Egypt. You know, the connection with land, animals, and the sea, and the river. And, you know, because for a lot of Egypt stuff, it's a river. The river deities, dolphins, you know. And so there's even versions of like Zeus Ammon or Jupiter Ammon with the body of a fish and the head of a ram or goat.
Getting us to that Capricorn imagery again, right? Like we saw with the sea goat in Almathea.
Yeah, yeah. So there is some of these representations, you know. Let's hit the next pic. Boom. All right. So here's a picture of Ammon. I couldn't find it. Many pictures. It's the only picture I could find of the god Ammon with the goat horns.
Oh, cool.
Merged. Yeah, this is Ammon merged with the goat. So having the goat horns, not the ram horns, but the goat horns. Because it depends on how the horns curve in different directions. There's a lot of mythologies to this. You know, and part of it deals with the goat of Mendes. That's another god as well. You know, the goat of Mendes is where they get an older version of Baphomet that they're saying is from Egypt, which is what the snake god Benedict. And he has 4 sets of horns on his head. This older god. You know, it's wild, these older mythologies. You know,
Totally.
when you take it back. And so some people trace the goat of Mendes, the Baphomet, to Egypt, to one of these Ammonite goat gods, you know, there in Egypt. But there's a little more to it. Let's hit the next pic. Boom. And that deals with the Pharaonic. Like there was a famous stela that was found, and that's a statue of Hatshepsut with the beard. A female pharaoh with the beard. Because they used to attach fake beards onto these pharaohs. And it's made from braided goat mane. Because there's this whole symbology we're going to get into now with the goats. In the temple incense, the laudanum, it's the incense that they burned in the tabernacle. Now, you know, goats, they would graze on this plant. And they would get it in their hoofs. They would collect it from their hoofs as well as their manes, because they would get this sticky stuff and it would smell. And that's what would collect the temple incense. And so they had different ways of collecting it. The shepherds, the goat shepherds or sheep herders, let's say. Go to the next picture. Yeah, right there. What's it? It's a Argestiri. That's the name of that term. Or a flail. And you would rake it to collect that incense, the ones that they were getting off the goat beards, because they were attaching the goat beards to the pharaohs after they would soak it in that solution or collect it off a goat that has been grazing in the fields. And, you know, that crook is a symbol of shepherding. That's the Jesus symbol of shepherding. You know, it's a symbol of husbandry, of controlling your flock. So yeah, that's what the Pharaoh has because he controls the people. And the other symbol is the flail. That some people say you whip an animal, but also to collect a lot of them, and it's part of the goat beard in the temple incense, the tabernacle incense. And it's made from rock roses. It's called a cistica, and it's a cousin of fennel. Like, you know, the fennel staffs that the Dionysian rituals, they have to have fennel staffs.
Yeah, the Thyrsus.
Yeah, this is relating to that. It's relating to staffs and fennel and goats and getting high in Egypt and ancient Greece, in Jesus and sacrifices, and all the elements are there. You know, let's hit the next pic.
Amazing.
And that's what it looks like. And they call it the Tears of Osiris. They collect it to burn it. There's stories about the Tears of Osiris and Jesus, you know, and the flail. And,
really?
You know, on the way to the crucifixion. You might want to throw that next image in. Boom, where they're whipping him with the flail. And mind you, if you were to type in Jesus and the money changers, they'll show you images of him whipping the money changers with that same flail, that same type of whip. And here he's being whipped. And supposedly, in some of the mythologies, the merbearers are collecting his blood, and those are the tears of Osiris. That's the temple incense off his back. His blood is the temple incense. You know,
that's amazing.
This is some of the mythologies, you know.
Right.
Dealing with him being a goat.
Again, we're going back to this idea that he is the scapegoat, right?
Yeah.
That we see or the pharmakos.
Yes. yes. The goat, a psychoactive goat tragedy.
And it's also interesting that the goats are the kings, because I also think I know it's in Matthew. I can't remember what the passage is, but there's that famous passage where Jesus compares believers and non-believers, and he describes believers as the sheep, right, and non-believers as the goats, right? Because goats are independent, right, and are hard to control, whereas sheep can be you know, made to fall in line, right?
Yeah, and it's funny because Thor, he's called the Lord of the Goats.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, you know, these Lord of the Goats. So there's just a lot going on with these animal symbologies. Ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, the Middle East, psychoactives. This is what we call entheogenic husbandry. You know, the crossroads of animal cultivation and human cultivation and psychoactive plants. You know,
amazing.
And there's even pictures of Jesus in the catacombs, besides him with dolphins and having agape love feast, but with goats.
Oh, wild.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So I think this is our last picture here, and then Ammon hop on with us, Dion.
Well, that's Jesus whipping the money changers at this temple that dealt with it's weird. He's mad because they're taking his money. They're collecting his tithes. It's not about collecting money. It's about they're taking his money. And he's whipping them with the flail. You can clearly see it's a pharaonic symbol. Because that's how he's got to keep his goats in line. Just say. So, yeah.
I love it. All right. Any last words before we bring on Mr. Dr. Ammon?
Oh, no. Well, how about this?
Here we go. Hi, Ammon. How's it going?
Thanks for throwing his whip, too.
Yeah. I thought I'd bring it with me. You know what I mean? Yay, Jesus. Beautiful job, in all seriousness. Nice job. Good coverage of the whole goat thing. And you're right there. I was tracking with you. And yeah, I love it. I would like to just add tragos, just the word tragos in Greek. You can use it for goat, but it also means just lewdness.
Oh.
Lewdness. And get this, it means the point in a boy's life when his voice begins to change.
Oh, wow.
That's a tragedy.
Gosh.
Yeah, now you know. Now you know. And I wanted to add that skin. You were talking about Amalthea, and you were talking about the skin of the goat that becomes Zeus's aegis. That's her skin. Amalthea's skin is what
Becomes the shield?
It becomes the protective skin that
Oh, wow.
ultimately Athena takes the head of Medusa and affixes it to it. Right? You know, the goat skin that is the protector of the god. That's Zeus of the Aegis. Yeah, that's her skin. That's his nurse. And I'm really glad, Dion, that you pointed out that she was a she who was nursing goats. So yeah. Yeah, Amalthea. Now, the big thing about Amalthea as a person is that her cult was spread all over the Aegean under the worship of Adrastea or Nemesis. So this was a goat-driven cult that brought justice to Greece. That's what they did.
That's so wild. Can you, Ammon, I wanted to ask you more about the sea goat imagery and what's going on with that. Are you familiar? Because I did come across some other myths, but it was hard to confirm from like sources, so I didn't want to necessarily bring them up.
Yeah, no, I don't talk about sea cows or sea goats because I don't know anything about them. But
Okay.
at that juncture, with the sea, everybody's talking about, oh, how are these cults? What does this have to do with the surging sea and the purple and the and goats? Right? It seems to always come back. This is just my professional opinion. I'll just put it out there. Everything that's associated with what they have in their immediate environment, all of those big natural factors that are pushing the civilization, be it agriculture, be it animal husbandry, that these things, you can trace these throughout the Mediterranean. When you guys talk about the production of a vessel, i.e. a goat, that can take a plant or a plant combo or whatever else it can eat and can turn it into a medicine, you're not just whistling Dixie. That's the whole premise behind the Dictaean Mount and the fact that on Crete we have this great religion that is centered around this nurse of goats. And what is she doing? She's protecting. She is making that king. It's essentially a kingsmaker cult that is oracular, right? From the famous Mount Ida, right? Ida is that sister of Amalthea, right? Which we all know is a couplet for Adrastea, and she who is that true goddess.
Gets us back to the Great Mother again, right?
Yeah. No. It's once you can smell that goat, you're like, oh, I know where I am. You know what I mean? All of a sudden you're going to start smelling all of those other drugs that are used with the satyrs and whatnot and everything, all the sex, and cults start to come into it. You guys were showing, Pan or a satyr, or somebody, I don't know, hairy beast guy. I think it was Pan, and he was with a goat. And yeah, I sent you a picture, by the way, Snap. If you want to put that up, you can, of the goat that people were asking for in the chat. They want the goat. It's getting there.
We want the goat. We want the goat.
Okay, 1 second here, and I will bring that goat. Okay. How do I do this?
Yeah,
Okay.
but nice presentation. Beautiful job. Beautiful job. My hands clapping my hands for you both. Fantastic. I love the coverage of Ammon. Ammon doesn't get enough coverage. You know what I mean? He just gets slighted a little bit there. But that the very fact that buried within Greek is that root for that boy who is coming of age to be the goat. It puts the entire rite in view. You can start to feel what they were feeling. Remember, I was telling people just this morning in a reading group, you're not measuring age by years, right? Think of how different that is for us. We think of your age in years. They did not measure your age in years. They measured your age with respect to your development.
Right. No, that's such a good point. That's such a good point, because this is something that's come up time and time again, is this confusion and this misunderstanding of the virgin, right? Because you've made this very clear that that's a marking of age. And then like we were talking about this the other day, when then there's usually with those temple priestesses, when they hit that certain age, then their virginity is, or their prime, they're sold off in their prime. And it's usually done via lot, like we saw with Jesus in the temple there, right?
Right. And with Mary, that's what happens with Mary, his mother, right? She's given, they did the lots for her, didn't they? Who got the best? I don't know. I guess it was Joseph, but she was 12. She was 12. Right. So why are they, what is this thing about the ages and the whatnot? Why the centaurs and the pederasts and all that? Why are these students? Because we're looking at development, right? And just like you say student, or what we say for the apostles, right? Just like for those people, the education is part of their development. Didn't you ever wonder why all these mysteries have things that look like they're, they're for people just coming to puberty? Well, it's because that's how the system was designed, right? These are initiations. So don't be surprised that the king of the universe is out with a goat nurse. Don't be surprised, because that's where you get the milk that has the lightning, right? Rhea knows this. That's why he's hidden in a cave with the one that can bring him that milk, right?
Yeah, the lightning he needs to defeat Kronos, right?
Correct.
Amazing. And I want to get into this idea, Ammon, with you of the pharmakos. Can you talk about what's going on in the Greek side with these sacrifices and the casting out of people and its relation to the goat and what we see in the Bible?
Sure. Yeah. And this gets my goat. This gets my goat. Where's my goat? Bring my goat up, Snappy. I told you she would do it, Chewy. Snappy, thank you so much.
Of course. Okay. No problem.
Yeah, it gets my goat. That'll be my cue. It gets my goat.
Here you go.
Yeah.
Should be up. There we are.
Look, it just derailed myself with my goat. No, what I want to say though is there is on Mount Dicte, there is in Crete, there is something that grows there that the goats will eat. And when the goats eat that, it pushes the arrows out of them. And as everybody knows, because we all know Cretan archery is a huge deal. And Cretan archers are outstanding. It's a big part of the culture. And they weren't all men. Yeah, fantastic. As a matter of fact, looks like the oldest were women. And so they've got this thing that this goat will push out the poison of the arrow. Why? Because it eats that which grows on the sacred mountain. It eats that dictamnon. Yeah, that dittany. They've identified it correctly, the dittany. And it causes that arrow to be expelled. Now, if you're going to be at all involved in the mysteries, you have to know all of this pharmacology. You have to know, because in going through the process, this is what you have to have: dote and antidote. So the goat is very much a processing unit, right? It's there for a reason, and whatever its sacred randiness is going to be able to bring out in you, because remember, these are cults that are using those drugs that cause Bacchic frenzy. So imagine we are putting ourselves as a group into ecstatic yet disciplined ecstasy, right? Into these states that are disciplined, trained, right? If you get enough of us, look, if we have enough dancers, right, we can supply you with the right drugs. We can give you we'll take you on a retreat, and it'll be a training session, be very demanding and whatnot. But in using the drug repeatedly, you will become more of a leader, just like the leader of the chorus, the choragites. You know, all of this stuff that you use, these terms for theater, they're all coming out of this mystery cult. They're all coming out of that mystery cult. So that choragites is the one woman who leads all of the others. She is able to set, in the midst of their mania, she is able to set the mood of the entire group, just like a marshal of a band or something would do. She's able to do that under the influence of psychotic substances that induce psychosis, like the hemlock, but that are being brought to us through what is the biology of the landscape, and that is the goats, right? It's no wonder that we're talking about sex with goats and all of these cults, right? It's no wonder. The whole drinking of the communion urine, that's a big deal. That's a bond. And so all I'm saying is it's all to produce mania, right? It's all Bacchic cult. It's all to produce mania. And that's what that goat does. That goat brings that. You can fight it, you can resist it, or you can give in. But it's going to overtake you, right? It's a matter of physics, quantum physics. Beautiful presentation, guys. I'm amazed at your work. It was, the perfect kind of bird's eye view of what the goat has been up to. Love it. What do you think of it? What do you guys think that Zeus was drinking?
I think it was a milk and some urine that could be fermented with the goat eating different herbs. And goats supposedly they love psychoactive mushrooms, among other things. I mean, they'll eat anything. We know they'll eat anything, and they'll eat whatever you put in front of them. So it's just up to the shepherd or the shaman to introduce, whatever psychoactives they need.
Before this episode, I was looking on Theoi, and there were 7 or 8 different passages I talked about where the goats are eating the vine. So it clearly has something to do with the grapes. They're definitely eating the grapes for sure. And then Dion, in your presentation, you showed us the sacred goat in Valhalla that adds her milk to the mead that all of the people joyously drink, and she's also eating a magic vine. So there's a clear connection to this Dionysus,
and it's fermented. And so you could take that image, and in the other episodes we showed how Mary is reaching up to the tree, the olive tree or the palm tree, and Leto reaching up to the tree, giving birth as they're touching the tree, is the same as the goat eating from the tree and giving birth through the fluids to the psychoactive soter.
Okay, so the next way I'd bump it up is to ask, what is the serous fluid Okay, this is in Galen, and I'm reading this passage in the Antidotes, and it's talking, or it was on Singles maybe, and it was talking about how you can take the serous milk of that virgin and what it is medicinally for the person. It's such a big image that Athena herself is portrayed by Nonus as one of these nurses that he describes as having grape-like breasts, which is just what Galen describes. And he's saying they're milking the prepubescent girl of this, substance that they're going to be using in cult and medicine. So was that a reference when we say the aegis that protects Zeus? And everybody knows why is the aegis so special? It is that skin of Amalthea, the nurse of Zeus, right? For those of you with ears to hear, right? Listen at the other level. But on the aegis, Zeus has affixed what? That head of Medusa, right? That's a thing for Athena. If you'll notice, Athena is always that virgin nurse who is going into battle with the skin of Amalthea and the head of Medusa. Why is it the head of Medusa? Because if you're going to go for Adrastea or for Nemesis, if you're going to go for justice, then you have to involve Medusa. The Medusa is that guardian, right? She is. That's what the Medwa does. And that Medusa's power is the power to stop you in your tracks. It's a paralytic power. And it induces fear. So when people see her coming with the aegis, they run. They don't want to look at it. So they run, right? It's not a matter of bravery anymore. That's what the virgin's aegis does. So when we see it associated with the Medusa, whatever it is cult-wise, whether it's vines, plants, animals, whatever it is, when we see it associated with the cult, we can say, what's the pharmacology of it? They've got the venom association right there. Athena is the one raising the dude who's half serpent, right? Have you ever wondered that? The goddess on top of the hill of where we invented democracy, she's raising a child that is half serpent. What, right? She's that virgin, and it's from her milk. That goat's milk is what brings the lightning. I don't know what that is biochemically. I don't know, but I know that that's everything within the cult. That's how the drugs are working. So, are they, your point today about the goats and using an intermediary to produce drugs is exactly, people have totally overlooked this historically because they overlooked the drugs. That's just the way it was because, we just can't study drugs. It's too dirty.
Well,
go ahead, Dion, sorry.
I can see it being connected to, because with Medusa in the blood is how you get Pegasus. And we talked about the horse as a pass-through for bioavailability. Like I said, you can interpret these myths, the animals and the herbs and plants and the characters and the mythologies taking place as alchemical formulas. People look at these alchemy things in the, Middle Ages. Maybe the Greek myths are alchemy.
Okay, stop. You just hit something that's so deep, and I'm just going to prove exactly what you said just by quoting John Littus, who's writing about Etruscan religion, says this is how the priests work. They use analogy, they use parables, or what you and I are now calling myth, in order to illustrate the physics that you don't understand. The same physics that bring the oracle, they're having to bring to you at the level of the analogy. Great, fantastic. Doesn't that So when all the cults show up, and some of them use the venoms, and some of them use the different plants, different vines, when some of them are the ones who are taking in the smoke fumigations, do they always have in their depictions, if they leave any behind, the evidence of whatever it is they're using to get high and see the reality that you and I can't normally see? Yeah, they do. They leave the stuff all over the place. It's like a dirty party. It's like going to a party from the 70s where you walk in the day after, there's still people sleeping on the floor and in different states of dress, and it smells funny. Yeah, like that. You bring the goats. That's what you get. You get those goats, but you have to have a cult if you're going to do it right. I was telling someone the other day, if you're going to do it right, you need to bring back the chorus. You need the goats. You need to bring back the satyr. You can't even bring back the satyr until Dion is standing there completely naked, covered with a drug that gives him a sustained sexual drive. Trying to stay nice on YouTube. For 7 days, Dion. That's what we have to get you through. We have to get you 7 days, and you have to be on some heavy, the scopolamine and the atropine. You got to go through the belladonnas, and you got to get all the good stuff out of them that causes you to have that panic. We're going to do it to you for 7 days. Right. And when you're doing it, you're going to be showing the rest of us how to bring from that invisible dimension into this one, those forces. It's going to scare people, Dion. But can we do it?
Well, they do it once a year at Burning Man. So I can't tell this last year nature got them. And they were locked in. Oh. Well, yeah, it's a static Bacchic energy, that we all want. We all need. You need to let loose sometimes and let go. Our whole lives are organized by stoplights, by numbers, 1, 2, 3. Everything's mechanical, mathematical. You just want to get naked and run in the forest like a wild goat. I get it. It's a static energy. There's nothing wrong with it. It's being natural. That's when I went to Africa, that's what they told me. You need to be natural again. You can take your socks off. You can walk on the dirt barefooted. The guy told me that. He goes, you could take your socks off. And what's ironic is that it's so simple that this technology is overlooked, because we look at science and we think we need all these gadgets and gear, and you need to go to school, med school for 20 years to be a doctor. When maybe they achieve these effects using plants and animals and sound.
I was telling somebody got my goat, that you don't have to bring them up. It pissed me off. It made me angry. Sorry. It made me angry because they brought up the whole Satan is a word in Hebrew. Right. And it's so that, oh God, it's so bad and so wrong. And it's just so sad. And that gets my goat. This kind of energy that you're talking about, that is this Bacchic energy, it is a conquering power. It's a conquering power. We're not only going to get you into the place with discipline, and we're going to get you into that place, but we're going to then facilitate the creation of a person who can tell us tomorrow. It's the end of all of these ecstatic religions. It's not just a party. The ending is to be able to raise that Korah. There is within DNA, right? Any DNA, there is within DNA the potential of the Korah, and you can raise her, and it requires a process involving chemicals that are derived naturally from your surroundings, and you can bring that Korah back. So why so? so you can tell the future. And when I say tell, so you can bring it. So you can bring it. The power of that oracle isn't just to tell you what's going to happen, it's to make it happen. That's the trick, Oedipus, right? It's going to happen to you because you're asking. That's why. You can't perform any experiment without changing the natural outcome, right? You really cannot truly observe. You're blind, right? But this operation of the mystery can bring that individual, that, you know, the queen can bring that Lady Babylon back. People were asking, I did a little bit today with, if you don't mind me indulging, I did a little bit today with Venus and Adonis and Bion. And we were talking about the maid in that, and the resurrection in that. And what's funny is you get so many hits time after time after time with these Greek works that will kind of refocus you on the fundamentals of the cosmos and how the cosmos works. And when societies pick this mystery up and give it room to operate, to start to work again, they go forward. They go forward. You think history is linear progression. It's not. It's not. It's step forward, step backward. And the Greeks had us to a point that we were right there where she was back. And in coming back, that bringing back that Lady Babylon, bringing back that seven-hilled city where that voice of prophecy came, that's all the religion you and I know is from that group. And these people are using goats to obtain drugs in order to complete their bios, their life. How do you complete your life? If you don't know there's an entire universe connected around you that's influencing you, if you didn't know, like the guys at MIT do now, that you're a reflection across the event horizon of a black hole, if you didn't know that, you've lived in darkness. It's been a prison. But if you've had the fire, if you've breathed that element and seen what is the real, guess what? You go there. You go there with her. You end up with her in a place of where only the muses are honored, right? Oh God. And what I mean by that, I'm sorry. Let me step back and say one thing. There is a creator. There is a creator. This is how I'm not saying Greeks are saying. There is a creator. She is called the Muse, and she writes you. Isn't that something? She writes you. This isn't God came and set crap up and span it and spun it and it works and no. And that's why people getting smashed to death or carved up doesn't make us stop. It doesn't penetrate our skulls. You cannot see everything around you that's going on. If you could, you'd honor justice, but you can't. You're blind. And I'm only speaking to select members of your group, those who were chosen. Right? Do you see how the mystery works? It's a function. It's a reality. And we can bring it back. We need some goats and we need a chorus. You know what I mean?
We gotta get to Pan, right? We need to induce that panic and experience the all, right?
Panic as in pan, and manic as in mania, as in hippomanus.
Love it, Hippomanus. Love it. Oh God, you guys are right on. This is 1,000 years ahead of its time. You guys are like time travelers. Did you come back in time to bring us this?
We went forward in time. We went forward in time to bring. And with that, I could say something crazy. Remote viewing. You might have heard this remote viewing stuff that's very popular out there. And that's groups of people coming together. They remote view this stuff. And you say, how so? Is these topics. You got groups of people out there meditating on this topic, that we're talking about on these subjects. And we're all looking collectively into the subconscious or the ether, whatever you can call it, and pulling it out. And you could say that's crazy. Why not? But isn't that a function of the muse?
Yeah, that's straight up. You're talking straight up physics. As a matter of fact, I think we should go one up and say, let's organize a party, Dion, just like they had in the Middle Ages. We'll look at the daughters of dawn coming together at their sacred Sabbath. They happen to call it a Sabbath. And they would come together at a banquet. And the food is notoriously terrible, right? You're not there for the food. You're not there for the food. You're there for the companionship. This is a place that they all met, that we can all meet across communities. It's a space that those whose eyes are not open, they can't access it. So it is safe from that monad. The monad is weighty. It is drawn to earth. That monad's power is confined by the earth. The Greeks knew that. That's why they call the Christians atheists. They denied that higher power that's outside the monad, right? And that's because they denied the mother, in my humble opinion. But we can use that. We can go to that place, right? There is a place, a dimension, if you will, where they met in the Middle Ages. Who met in the Middle Ages? Number one, Satanists. Number two, witches. Number three, devil worshippers. Number four, heathens. Do you hear the vocabulary that's coming through? These are names they gave everybody else, right? Pagans, right? The reason I can't have a pagan academy, I'm founding an academy, and I can't call it a pagan academy because everybody will see paganism through the detritus of the lens of Christianity. That's what they'll see it through. So no, nay. But these places are places that pagans can go if they know how. And that's what's funny. How would you get to a place? Dion, if we're going to have a party, Snappy, she's going to show up dressed the finest. It's a plus one, by the way. It's a plus one. And again, for those of you with ears to hear, this is the magic. This is the physics of the magic. It's why you have the succubus and the incubus and that power. You have to have that extra one to power your flight to this place. And you say, my God, mommy, that man is on some kind of substance or something, right? Yes, little Johnny, that's what they were doing. And guess what it was again? It was mandrake and it was the psychosis-inducing drugs. Yes, you can dream on those things too. And the physicians know it. They use mandrake in surgery as kind of to calm you down. Yeah.
Going with the Christian thing, though, what I think is going on there is like, it's even more so, they vilify Saturn or Kronos and Pan, but really it's this twisted thing where they don't see the cycles. They're obsessed with the tyrant. They worship the tyrant. They don't recognize what the Greeks understood is that eventually all rulers are corrupt. You got to overthrow the tyrant and move beyond. Like you said, they're tying themselves to the demiurge. They're bound to the monad. They'll never break free of the earth, They can't.
And that's why they'll fight this coming renaissance of psychedelic or psychotropic drugs. You watch as they become integrated with medicine and religion. People are not predicting the religious side, right? But it's what's happened in the past. There's no reason it wouldn't happen now. We aren't under special circumstances. This kind of natural drive for us to be in a chemically altered state in celebration of the cosmic invisible. Yeah, it's something that comes out over time, over and over again. It's something else. Whether it's some dude in a cave making this and eating the mushrooms, or whether it's Santa Claus, right, with his Finnish reindeer or whoever they are, and I don't know who's drinking. Somebody's drinking somebody else's urine, right? All of that, it's gonna resurface and come back. What do you guys think? Because I'm predicting the evangelicals, the orthodox of all faiths, they will stand up and say, we cannot have the joining of psychoactive substances and religion.
Well, even further on that, in California, they just voted on psychoactive substances in the state. Governor, it deals with Newsom, and he voted against mushrooms because, and there was even somebody, there was a story that happened in the past week. There was a pilot. It was an off-duty pilot who was on shrooms on a plane and tried to crash the plane. You know,
the reality.
I'm sorry, I'll shut up.
I was just going to say, they want us, the powers that be, want us to be malleable and controllable, right? They're only going to give you drugs that are going to keep you bound to the earth, that keep you either producing or consuming. Anything that truly can break through, any combination that can break through, they're not going to allow you to have. And what they constantly do is they take good drugs and they bastardize them. They make them worse. They remove the balance. You know, it just becomes corrupted. And what we see with marijuana and stuff, you know,
until you restore your society with the purge, your mania level will increase and increase and increase and increase until you destroy yourself.
Subconscious mania. That's subconscious mania. Right. That's not. It's not focused. It's not active. It's in your subconscious shadow. And it comes out one day and you beat your wife, you do some crazy shit, you go postal. That's what it's called. You go postal because you can't consciously let out your mania and have an ecstatic release. That's all it is. An ecstatic release. It's non-personal. It's non-threatening to any god. It's just a natural thing that humans and animals want to do. We want to shake. We want to move. I want to live.
We're going to keep seeing more things, I think, like the previous pandemic that just happened, where those who couldn't adapt, those who were bound down by fear, were the ones who suffered the most, right? Those who weren't willing to admit what was coming for them or what was happening all around them. And it's only going to get worse. And notice that it's the Christians that are the most, and the super religious, who deny that reality, who don't want you to take medicine, who don't want you to protect yourself or protect everyone else around you. But nature's going to destroy those people.
Well, I got to say one thing here. If we're bringing up COVID, we're dealing with husbandry here. Isn't this an issue with birds and bats? And didn't this start with SARS, avian bird flu? And then we have a the 5N1, and then it deals with the bat. What's that? What were they? Gain of function research? Because, bats are perfect for that. They can carry rabies and they're not affected by it. So, of course, the military is going to want to weaponize that and learn that technology. So what we're seeing with COVID is exactly what this whole episodes and the work of the doctor here is about, is our relationship to psychoactives in nature, which is, it's in the shadows, but it's there. They use it to control us. They use it in religion. They use it in food. They use it in science. They use it now in all of our modern technologies and all of our commercials, and Disneyland uses it. Everything uses our senses against us now. But it's illegal. Just saying.
We're going to take 2 steps back with the guy who tried to wreck the airplane, and that's going to take us back, because people are going to say, "Oh my goodness, everybody that takes mushrooms is going to want to kill everybody now, right? No. How silly that is the drugs that we're talking about that they're using in antiquity, these compounds, they make mushrooms look like, it's just a weekend trip,
Yeah.
no big deal. Bring a nice gown so we can go out and grab dinner, while we're out. That's not what the level of psychotherapy that they're performing in antiquity, and it is psychotherapy because it is within underneath the roof of medicine, healing cult, right? So you can give your horse drugs to treat its mania. We saw that in the Corpus Hippiatricorum. You can give your horse drugs to treat its mania. You can give humans drugs as well to treat mania. And what you're doing when you're doing it with these drugs, these compounds, is you're purging. That's how they consider it, catharsis. It's called a catharsis. And if your society does not undergo catharsis, it self-destroys its heart. It will turn on itself if you don't. The only cure, it's a cure, the only cure coming for what we are undergoing is the junction of science, medicine, and religion. And we stand upon the possibility of a renaissance where we change our medicine back to that natural model. And I think the cure is there, and I don't foresee people being able to stop it. I just hope the AI pushes us forward and we can bring the whole thing. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I thought of Asclepius at the Asclepion in Turkey, where part of the healing process when you went there, you had to write down your affliction. You had to act it out in the form of a play. I mean, I'm not just talking about he would give you plant remedies, energetic remedies. They put you in a theater that had acoustics that would project onto you different. They would sing towards you. It was a multidisciplinary approach, Asclepius. With the venoms, with dreams, you would have to tell them, well, what did you dream last night? And, well, I need you to write out your affliction into a play, and I want you to perform it, how it makes you feel. So medicine, that's where theater is part of medicine. And in our modern society, everything is so separate. But if we had that reunion of theater and medicine again, then we could see that some of the roots of medicine, our disease, is energetic and emotional. It's not just physical.
And I want to point out how poignant this is, because like yesterday I did that episode on HD, and HD she underwent psychoanalysis with Sigmund Freud himself. And in her memoirs, Freud says he gets this idea of psychotherapy from Asclepius. And he even asks her to write a series of poems and books about her problems. And she does. She writes this whole novel called Bid Me to Life. And it's taken directly from the Greek myths. You had the same kind of revitalization that you saw in the Renaissance at the just before World War II. These cycles keep happening.
We are thieves. We are thieves of a humanity of the past that was able to do things that we have lost the ability to do. That's all it comes to it. We suffered the Dark Ages as a human family. We in the West, we went through Christianity controlling thoughts to the point that don't think about Aphrodite anymore. Right. And my God, if you're not doing exactly what we want you to do sexually, we're going to prune you, those dark ages that we went through, there's a chance for that to open up again. You guys can feel it. You can taste that stuff in the air, and the ability for us to multiply knowledge, like the old Bible says, it's right at our fingertips.
That's such a good point, Ammon. We need to be very weary, and we need to be listening to these far-right extremists, because what are they talking about? What do they really want to do? They want to go back to that Dark Ages where they're dictating all of your thought and sexual behavior. They want to imprison women and turn them into sex slaves. That is literally what they're talking about. You just got to read between the lines.
That's Sharia law. Sharia law is Old Testament. You know, Old Testament's good for some people because with the Old Testament comes control. It's a book of control of a jealous God. You know, Allah. That's Old Testament. Al-Kitab, people of the book. People of the book are angry and jealous. You know, what's weird though, like the Constitution that wrote that women and black folks are equal, though the people that wrote that kept the women and the black folks in the barn. I look at the New Testament, it talks about love, but even though the folks that were there, the things they were performing and doing was a little different than the message. You know,
always is the case, isn't it?
The irony of that, you know. So yeah, we need acceptance, and with mania is acceptance. Mania is a static release. And so you have to surrender to that. So that's acceptance. You have to let go. That's what they say. You need to let go. And that's what it's about. We're so wound up with wars and orthodoxy that there's no more mania.
You know what's also with the mysteries that I think is really important to highlight? It's about experiencing the other, that deity. But also when you confront the other, when you engage into the abyss, it transforms you, because in order to understand it, you have to meet it at the same pace, you know. And what we see with a lot of people who are held back is that when they're confronted with something that's different, rather than be transformed by it, rather than understand and accept it, they reject it. But the mystery tradition is about embracing that change. It's about seeing the other, drawing them down and being possessed by it, to become like them, to take that on, to induce this change. What do drugs fundamentally do? They poison us, but through that poisoning, it breaks our classic train of thought. It forces us to see outside of the box and operate and think in ways we couldn't otherwise. It induces transformation and conflict with the other.
Yeah, hail Satan to that. Hail Satan to that. What do you think the chances are of us being able to bring back an oracle? Somebody should write a science fiction about this. Bringing back the oracle. So a person that you have put through the same rigors, chemically, biochemically, and all of the training that's involved, with the dancing and with the geometry and all the exact sciences that they're using. What do you think the likelihood is that with the proper religion, you could start producing oracles?
I think it's very high. I mean, we already look at the science behind some of this. Scientists are starting to recognize things like precognitive dreaming. They're recognizing things like remote viewing. You know, we're on the cusp of so much of this potential. Like you said, we're starting to see where the lines blur between religion and science, you know, and it's only going to accelerate.
Yeah. The muses, huh? I'll tell you a weird story. I did work for the psychic hotline when I was 19 years old. This was like 91 or something. I was working at the psychic hotline and I applied for a job. And I told him, I'm not psychic. And the guy said, that don't matter how much, I can train you. And he brought me in and he was in a wheelchair. And he would do this over the phone. They would call and I used the I Ching, if you know what that is. He said, well, figure out you need a divination system. And he taught me some tricks. He said, around, people will come into some money around April. I see them coming into some money. And he told me, people around January get really stressed out and they have a lot of financial burden around January. And he taught me all this stuff. And I'm like, really? And he would talk to people and he would bait them into it. You know, like, well, I'm sensing you're having some difficulties with this female. Is that your mom or your significant other? You know, and so he trained me, and I started doing it, and it was funny because the people will call, they want to connect. You know, I had some weird stuff. I had a lady call who was like a wife of a mafia boss. I quit the job. It was too much mentally for me after the people started telling me their stories and their weird stuff. You know, and I understood. After that, I studied what being psychic is. And there's sympathy, empathy. You could be apathetic. You know, and it's how we connect with each other, because we're one being together, separated, you know. And there's an electrical connectivity between us. You know, that's what the guy told me. You know, and there's divination systems, and people will tell you their psychic stuff. So it was like Asclepian, his whole technique. You know, and he's all, you get your people. He's all, have them talk about their problems, and it was a wild thing. And he said, you don't have to be psychic. I can train you. So that's the moral of the story.
It's a technology, isn't it?
I have a parallel story that's exactly, if you don't mind me sharing something personal.
Please.
It's exactly parallel to that, though. When I was a kid, I was afraid in my dreams. I was afraid. And I got to an age where I was just kind of, I don't know, I was still about 11. And I heard somewhere that you could affect what happens in your dream. That you could tell yourself something, kind of pre-program yourself for a dream. And so I tried doing this, and I said, you know what, I'm going to go into this dream, and I'm going to try to realize it's a dream while I'm doing it. And it worked. It worked. And so what's funny is I didn't anticipate. Once I realized you could control the dream, where do you think my mind went? It just naturally gravitated to the darkest places that you could possibly imagine. It went to that panic. It went to that place and I found that you could go in a dream, you could go and find images. You could work, and these images will show up in other people. Doing this kind of stuff intentionally, people will start to recognize what's going on. It's magic that's been used for ever since the Magi were first founded by the woman Medea. So I think it's a big part when you talk about remote viewing and that kind of stuff. Yeah, they'll figure out the science one of these days. Some egghead at MIT will figure it out, and then we'll all get together and, you know, cruise the universe. But yeah, this is I love this. And this is straight up ancient magic, guys. It's straight up. This is how they're doing it. This is how they're performing. What is it? The sympathy. What's interested me is, what is the sympathy that you can induce an incubus in someone, that you can go, like someone wrote to me recently who had just gotten out of prison and said, I got out. I know that you were invading my dreams and that you were performing sexual acts on me in my dreams. I'm going to come and get you. What is it that allows for that kind of transfer? What are the actual physics of that projection? Someday they're going to wake up and realize, oh, all that. Notice every time they've got a renaissance or enlightenment, they've got this occulty side of it. And people start really delving in and rediscovering what the people we thought were nuts were doing. It's a science. It's a science. It's not a place to be swept away. It's a part of nature, man. You're never going to escape it. And the prophecies are all about, in the end times, this multiplication of knowledge is going to bring back this cup of bath.
Nope. Looks like Ammon is being shut down by that Bacchic radiation, but hopefully he will be back in a second. I also just wanted to kind of add in on some of my own experience. So in regard to a lot of this kind of weirdness. For years and years when I was younger as a kid, I used to have precognitive dreams where I would have a dream and then it would come true. And my parents can attest to this because I'd freak out and I'd tell them this kind of stuff. And normally it would be mundane things and stuff, but where it would get really wild, and I still don't have any way to explain this, is that when I would try to change the dream, that would induce the reality. Okay? And sometimes I would have these recursive dreams where I would recognize in the dream that I'm dreaming about the future and that I'm engaged in this process of precognitive dreaming. Okay. And then in reality, the same thing would happen. And I'd get stuck in kind of like an inception loop. And it wouldn't be more than a few seconds, but it would feel like hours. And I haven't had it a couple of years, but that used to freak me out as a child to the point of crying and stuff. And since that one of the biggest reasons I got involved in this magical stuff and looking for these things was just because of these experiences in my youth. Have you ever had anything like that, Dion?
Yeah. But it's far and few in between.
Yeah.
Some people have jobs as psychics. They go to work at 9 a.m. and it's supposed to work at 9 a.m. when you log into work. That's not how it works for me.
No.
If something happens, I'll know it's because when the thing happens, I'm like, oh shit. I dreamt about that last week. It's far and few in between.
Right.
For me, with the eclipse stuff. Before we did the episodes on the eclipses, I had a dream where I was seeing eclipses in my dream, and I thought it was awake because I even told my people in the dream, like, "Is this a dream?" Like, no, you're awake. I'm like, oh, I'm awake right now. I was even saying that in the dream, like, I'm awake. I'm not dreaming. And then I woke up.
That's wild. Actually, since the eclipse, things have kind of jumped up to an 11 for me in terms of the crazy dreamings and the crazy feelings. I had this wild dream, and I was kind of reluctant to talk about this, but I guess I will. But basically, I felt like the muse showed up and started giving me serious crap. It was like, You're only going halfway. I've given you this grand opportunity, and basically she's giving me shit for not studying.
But you told me that you're on your game. You're going harder on the study,
right? And I don't know if it's 100% true or not, but it freaked the hell out of me, and I find myself studying. And whether or not that's my own mental bias, it doesn't matter. But this is where I find myself, And it just happened to coincide with the eclipse, and I'm not the only one has feel this kind of intense energy since that moment.
Oh,
it's also kind of funny that Ammon brought up the dream thing, because again, mine was far less enthusiastic. I remember, before I ever saw Ammon on any of these kind of channels or whatnot, I had a dream, but it was like sleep paralysis. Okay. Couldn't move. Right. And then all of a sudden, floating above me was a person in a black robe with a bald head and the tattoo, and now, again, if I'm going to add in some kind of doubt, maybe my mind jumped to conclusions, but I remember a bald guy over my bed with freaking head tattoos. And then months later, I'm flipping through YouTube and there's him. And it shocked me enough that I stopped what I was doing and started reading his books. So,
well, there you go. And I think that's how the muse works in our lives. That's
right?
how life is. We're all interconnected. So I don't know if the good doctor will be coming back.
It's been quite a while anyway. We've been going for, I think we should probably wind down.
All right.
What do you think?
Yeah. Well, there's one thing I would like to say, a big that's all I gotta say.
Right? I got to dig more into this Alamothea and realize that she's the nurse of goats, not the goat herself. That was some wild stuff that Ammon was revealing to us, and this connection to Adraste and Nemesis. Wild stuff. Absolutely loved your presentation as well, Dion. Thank you for all that amazing work and showing us that stuff, like the pharaohs and everything. So cool. And we didn't get to ask Ammon or get too much into it, but Jesus is the goat. He's fulfilling that role, right? He's the pharmakos. He's the scapegoat. Very interesting.
Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement.
Right? So thank you guys all for tuning in and having this discussion with us. And we hope that you will like and subscribe. If you have any comments, please leave them below. Any criticisms as well. We want to hear it, you know. Like I said, we're amateurs. We're interested in exploring these ideas on a personal level, and we want to hear from you. Any last words, Dion? All right, everyone. Peace, love. Hail Satan. Until next time. Make sure you also go like and subscribe Ammon at Lady Babylon 666. All right. Take care, my friends.